1/5 of the population in the United Kingdom is living in some degree of poverty despite being the 5th richest nation in the world. This was one of the findings of a report by the United Nations Special Envoy on Poverty who visited the country. Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, reports.
After a 2-week visit of different UK cities, the UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, Philip Alston, issued a report outlining the gravity of the issue in the UK, where 20% of the population are living in some degree of poverty.
The UN Special Rapporteur Philip Alston, who came to the UK, visited many parts of the United Kingdom over a 2-week period, talking and listening to ordinary people telling their stories, to ordinary people talking about how they were too afraid to eat because there was not enough food, talking about the reality of 1.5 million people relying at the moment on emergency food at food banks.
London is the city with the highest number of multimillionaires in the world, yet in Newham, one of London's boroughs visited by Alston, 43% of children live in poverty, and there are at least 320,000 people who are homeless in Britain according to research by the housing charity Shelter. The extent of the British media's coverage of Alston's visit and his report on poverty in the UK has been questioned.
Firstly, while the coverage was widespread, it was very short-lived. 1 or 2 days, perhaps, of sort of intensive looking at it and looking at what he was saying. But then Brexit took over, the Labour Party took over, and it just fell out of the press coverage completely. Secondly, the other challenge with the mainstream press coverage of Alston's visit was that there was no context. Alston's visit was the 5th report by a UN committee since June 2016.
And to even...
The criticism of the UK media goes further. There are those who argue that mainstream outlets haven't properly covered the reasons for the growing levels of poverty in Britain, such as the cuts in social spending known as austerity policies.
While the press has covered austerity and it's covered poverty in quite detail, what it's done, it's done what we refer to in the UK as poverty porn. That is, it's focused on shocking stories about the impact on people and these horror stories of what the state has done to the poorest people in society. However, what's lacked is any critical analysis of why this is being done.
In early December, the UN report was discussed in the British Parliament when Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn confronted Prime Minister Theresa May over what he called a scathing report from the UN, saying the government's policies had been punitive, mean-spirited and callous. May insisted she did not accept the UN report's findings. The debate on rising poverty levels in the UK will continue, but as Christmas approaches, it appears that for many people in the UK there will be little to celebrate.